9 Part 2. Victorien Sardou is hardly a great dramatist. The only plays of his which today might survive are Diplomacy, Madame Saint-Jean, Divorcons, and, of course, Tosca, which is perhaps best heard in Puccini's version. But as Bernhardt was the greatest showwoman of her time, Sardou is the greatest show carpenter. The British critic A.B. Walkley said, "With Sardou, playwriting is not merely as much a trade as playmaking. Sardou has perfected the clockwork play. He has been called a mere set of fingers with the theater at the tips of them." And Henri de Reynier commented to Dumas Fils, "Ah, the Sardou. Does he know his theater, or rather his public?" He did indeed know every trick for intriguing that public, and G.B. Shaw dismissed his brilliant bag of such tricks as sheer sardoodledom. Sardoodledom. Sheer sardoodledom. That's funny. In a day when Ibsen, Chekhov, and the problem dramatists were coming into fashion, Sardou preferred to write good theater. His only aim was to interest, amuse, move, excite, and thrill the large public that went to his plays. And being a man of genius, he did this as well as any playwright has ever done it, wrote Maurice Baring. The acerbic Edmond de Goncourt, who didn't like Sardou, as he didn't like many people, accused him of being un cabotin exclusivement préoccupé d'argent. If such an accusation is true, the preoccupation was richly rewarding. Stagey, sometimes even claptrap, as his plays might be, they epitomized the theater of an epoch. With Sarah for interpreter, they brought in fantastic grosses at the box office. After a number of joint successes, the star and her playmaker became spoken of as the two S's. And it was a bon mot of the boulevards that there is but one Sarah, and so Sardou is her prophet. One wonders about the spelling of the last word. Prophet, Prophet's, as it's written, and prophet, one wonders about the spelling of the last word. They mean prophet with an F-I-T. But this profitable association, see it's right there, was not to be started immediately. That afternoon in June, when the playwright called at the Avenue de Villiers with the script of Fedora, he was again accompanied by the vaudeville manager Raymond Deslandis. Sarah received them out in her garden, which was a jungle clutter of flowers and bushes, vines, fruit trees, and potted plants. It was almost impossible to move without knocking or kicking over a trampling some bit of flowering vegetation. And Sardou, who was an instinctive director, had a way, when reading aloud one of his plays, of striding up and down before his listeners, acting out every part himself. During the course of his reading, he broke several shoots off a rose tree, knocked over a porcelain jardiniere, and decimated an herbaceous border. His hostess heard him out with unprotesting attention. Her instincts for surefire theater was as unerring as Sardou's, and she saw in Fedora not only a big box office draw, but for herself a superb part complete with spectacular death scene. All graciousness, she turned to Deslandis, who proposed an immediate production at the vaudeville, with a salary for her of 1,000 francs a performance, and a guarantee of 100 performances. This was a staggering offer for those days, and Sarah knew it. However, she played with her visitors like a cat with two mice. Her pride was still rankled by their earlier brush-off after her return from America. With a quiet smile, she gently accused Deslandis of joking. She was well aware, she said, that the vaudeville, when sold out, could bring in a capacity gross of 7,500 francs. She wouldn't dream of appearing there at less than 1,500 francs a performance, plus 25% of the net profits. Deslandis fairly reeled at the demand, but the lady stuck to her guns, and almost tearfully he gave in. Then the two men asked her how soon she could go into rehearsal, and with a pretty gesture of regret she answered that, alas, She would not be available until 1882. She had signed up with Jarrett for an immediate extensive tour of Europe. If, she added, during her 6-month absence, the gentleman felt obliged to find another actress for the part, she could not, of course, stand in their way. The gentlemen took their leave in a state of shock. Sarah knew she was taking a gamble, but she felt certain it was one at which she would win. The tour began in London, again at the Gaiety. On this third return engagement, she appeared in La Dame aux Camélias, a play hitherto banned by the Chamberlain's censorship. Hitherto banned by Lord Chamberlain's censorship. With some trepidation, the ban had been lifted. They need not have worried, for Sarah managed to play the frail courtesan with such delicacy. Victoria herself, some years later, considered it a risk not too great for the royal ears, and Bernhardt was to give a command performance of it before the dumpy little queen in her hotel at Nice. Ellen Terry, after watching this exquisite interpretation of Marguerite Gauthier, said, "On the stage, she has always seemed to me a symbol." Gauthier said, "On the stage, she has always seemed to me a symbol, an ideal, an epitome rather than a woman. She is always a miracle." It is this extraordinary decorative and symbolic quality of Sarah's which makes her transcend all personal and individual feelings on the stage. No one plays the love scene better, but it is a picture of love, rather than a suggestion of the ordinary human passion as felt by ordinary people. Sarcey, who had come puffing over from Paris to see the performance, wrote back that it was a pleasure, an enchanting, a delicious pleasure, something perfect, with none of the correct and cold perfection which is born of negative qualities, but an animated and living perfection. By now, Bernhardt had built up a cult of London worshippers. The public collected her photographs. Young girls kept scrapbooks of her press notices. Aspiring actresses memorized her roles, the recitations of which a merciful providence spared her from having to hear. She said to herself, "I attract all the lunatics of the world." She said of herself, "I attract all the lunatics of the world." Friends told her about one old spinster who, in a corner of her lonely lodgings, had set up an altar consecrated solely to the Divine One. In addition to many cabinet photographs, it bore a number of objects she had touched: a pair of gloves, a handkerchief, a hairpin. As they told her about this elderly eccentric, they laughed inordinately, but the Divine One silenced them, saying, "Don't make fun of her. I love her very much." Then she added, "She probably drinks." The European tour, which followed England, led first through Middle France and the Midi. It continued on to northern Italy, Greece, Hungary, Switzerland, Belgium, and Holland. The Bernhardt legend had permeated Europe, and everywhere the public flocked to see her act, whether or not they understood a word of French. Those who hadn't the price of a ticket stood for hours outside hotel entrance or stage door to watch her go in or out. In Scandinavia, her train, while passing through a tiny hamlet, was slowed down at the petition of the villagers who wanted to tell their children and grandchildren they had seen Sarah Bernhardt waving through the window. One adoring author was to write, "Among those waiting at the stage door are the rich whose only worth is that they admire you. And there are the wretched who raise themselves up like the great ones of the earth because they will see Sarah pass by. And there's perhaps a criminal, a man abandoned by all, and who will be seized the moment you have passed. But he will say, 'Death does not matter now. I saw Sarah before I died.'" It was the last era of royalty, and she found herself the toast of the Austria of the Habsburgs, the Spain of the Bourbons, the Russia of the Romanovs. However, she purposefully avoided the Germany of the Hohenzollerns. When asked why her tour did not include such cultural centers as Munich and Berlin, she snorted indignantly, "What? Defile my hands with Prussian money? The hands of that Victor Hugo has kissed." One story goes that a German impresario, one Herr von Sturz, once called on her to try to persuade her to play in his fatherland. Bernhardt flatly turned down his proposal. Von Sturz begged, flattered, and cajoled, but the patriotic actress could not be budged. Finally, the man rose, clicked his heels, and declared, "Your price, madam, will be ours, no matter what." And at that, Sarah cried out in ringing tones, 5,000 millions, which was the price exacted from France by Prussia for war damage, for war damages. Von Sturz beat a hasty retreat. Crowned heads came to see her in the theater, and she gave command performances in their palaces. Alfonso XII presented her with a diamond brooch. Franz Joseph gave her a parure of rare cameos. It's Parure, parure of rare cameos, while Umberto of Italy, see, I can't even say Italy. Umberto of Italy paid tribute with an exquisite 18th century Venetian fan. The Archduke Frederick of Austria put his Schloss at her disposal, saying that no hotel was a fit residence for a queen. It was dead winter when Sarah Bernhardt invaded Russia. The one and only setback to her triumphant royal progress was in Odessa. This was a period when anti-Semitism was rampant. Pogroms were frequent, and because word had gotten about that Bernhardt was half Jewish, she was mobbed and might well have been stoned but for the intervention of the police. St. Petersburg was a different story. Here her success was spectacular, and special trains were run from Moscow for theater enthusiasts to join the block-long lines outside the box office. Every evening, a red carpet was unrolled over the snow from the curb to the stage door, and after each performance, crowds ran behind her sleigh and fought to pick up the flowers she tossed to them. The French ambassador paid official tribute with a formal dinner. When she spoke with admiration of his distinguished position and high functions, he replied, "Madame, France has only one ambassador, Sarah Bernhardt." Twice she was invited to perform at the Winter Palace. After her first performance, Alexander III stepped forward to meet her, and as she started to make a deep reverence, the Tsar of all the Russians stopped her, saying, "Non, madame, it is I who must bow to you." And this he did before his entire court. The incident caused a lot of talk among high society, but His Imperial Majesty's gesture of homage to an actress was not the only topic of gossip concerning Madame Bernhardt. For if the Russian capital was the scene of one of her great professional victories, it was also the setting for her private Waterloo. As to how Sarah Bernhardt first met Jacques de Molay, accounts differ. Some say Sardou brought him to call. Others claim that he was introduced by Jean Bernhardt. The tragedy was that she ever met him at all. He was 11 years her junior, handsome as Adonis, insolent, vain, and altogether despicable. He came from a prominent family in Athens. His actual first name was Aristides, and was stationed in Paris as an attaché to the Greek diplomatic corps. He had further established himself as one of the most notorious Don Juans ever to raise mayhem in the feminine world. Stop there. So he had further established himself as one of the most notorious Don Juans ever to raise mayhem in the feminine world.